This is Margie Barrett of Lansdale, Pennsylvania, listening to the International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on TKUT 90.3 FM Montreal.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, September the 8th, 2024, here on CKUT 90.3 FM in the city of Montreal. My name's Sheldon. I am with Jill. We are here every Sunday morning with 30 minutes of news and information of things going on in the world of radio. We have some local stories from Canada and a few international items as well. And in the second half of our show, we're going to talk pirate radio a little bit, some developments going on. So we'll get to that in part 2 of today's show. We thank you for tuning in. We'll start off with a story that's come from Broadcast Dialogue by Connie Thiessen, and it is to do with CBC Radio, a new program. Mattea Roach to host a new literary program for CBC Radio. The CBC has announced a new 1-hour literary program, Bookends, with Mattea Roach joining the CBC Radio and CBC Listen schedule for this fall. Premiering today, the 8th of September. The show will see Roach, best known as the winningest Canadian contestant ever on Jeopardy!, in conversation with Canadian and international writers. It will air Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 Newfoundland, and 3 p.m. Pacific time, with repeats on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. She says, "I'm incredibly excited to move into this role, which I hope and expect will allow me to grow both as a reader and as an interviewer." She said in a CBC announcement, "I've always loved books and I'm curious about creativity and the world around us. I'll be speaking with authors from different genres, different parts of the world, and different stages in their career. This is an amazing opportunity for both me and our audience to get to know writers I love and be introduced to exciting new voices shaping today's literature." Roach's upcoming guests will include Iranian-American Kaveh Akbar, poet, American humorist Sloane Crosley, and Canadian novelist David Hubert, and Heather O'Neill. Roach appeared on the final episode of the long-running CBC literary program Writers and Company on September the 1st. Eleanor Wachtel, largely considered Canada's First Lady of Literature, announced her retirement from CBC Radio early this year. So this is a really interesting opportunity. If you're a fan of Jeopardy, like I am, you may remember Mattea Roach. She was there forever, one of the most successful contestants on the show, and she was just a wealth of knowledge. She seemed to know, a whole lot about a lot of different things. She's been running, she's a political junkie. She ran a political based podcast here in Canada for quite a long time, and she's really personable, really easy to listen to. So I think she'll do really well, and it's a nice feather in her cap to be approached by CBC Radio to do a national radio program. The show Writers and Company was very popular on CBC, and so was the host Eleanor Wachtel. So she's stepping into some big shoes to fill, but I have a feeling that she'll probably do a pretty good job with it.
It's an interesting jump, though, when you think that, from Jeopardy star to CBC Radio.
Yep, it's pretty special.
So we have a birthday bash coming up, a 250 kilowatt birthday bash from Pop Shop Radio. So this is via Tony Pavick, Pop Shop Radio, Hope, British Columbia. So mark your calendars. Pop Shop Radio will be celebrating 4 years of filling your ear holes with lots and lots of kilowatts, with a special 250 kilowatt blast from the Wooferton, UK transmitter site. It will air at 03 hours UTC on September the 10th on 11990 kilohertz, and it will be beamed to North America. And there are more details that will be coming soon. So it's interesting. Pop Shop Radio has been doing a lot of these little broadcasts here and there. And this one should make it to North America pretty well on 250 kilowatts. So it's going to be very interesting. Mark your calendars. Don't forget it. 03 UT, September 10th. That's September 9th in the evening, North America.
Yeah, we know we got to know Tony through the Canadian International DX Club. He is a member, and as you say, he's been doing pop shop radio for quite some time now, 4 years. And it's predominantly a music show. He has a lot of different themes. He's done some Canada Day shows featuring Canadian artists. It's a nice program that he puts together, and he's got quite a lot of followers and listeners. This will be nice to have one specifically directed at North America. So do check it out, and we wish Tony good luck with the show.
In our next news, we have the Indian government that approves rolling out of 730 FM channels across 234 new locations. This is via Radioinfo Asia. India's Union Cabinet has approved the proposal for the third batch of ascending e-auctions for 730 FM radio channels in 234 new cities, with an estimated reserve price of 7.8 billion rupees under the private FM radio Phase 3 policy. According to the official statement, the Cabinet also approved a proposal to set the annual license fee for FM channels at 4% of gross revenue, excluding goods and services tax. This will apply to the 234 new cities and towns. The rollout of these new locations will fulfill the unmet demand for FM radio and offer new and local content in regional languages. The initiative is also expected to create new employment opportunities, promote local dialects and culture, and support the Vocal for Local initiative. Many of the approved cities and towns are in districts and areas affected by left-wing extremists. The introduction of private FM radio in these regions will further strengthen the government's outreach efforts. So that's a lot of stations, and a lot of cities will now have these FM outlets to listen to. So this is a good initiative. I guess the more radio, the better.
Yeah, India is such a huge country. There's lots of remote areas that I'm sure, shortwave was very popular in India to get to many of these regional sections of the country, simply because they didn't have the ability to put in local stations in so many areas. But now, as you say, 730 stations is really dramatic, covering 234 cities and towns. So the FM bands are going to start to fill up in India. Might be interesting. Some of the online SDRs, if you can start tuning around, that have FM capability. There's so many different dialects and languages in India as well. So there's plenty of material to put on the radio. I'm sure a lot of people in these smaller towns are going to be happy to have some programming coming to them on local radio stations. We have one more international story, this one to do with Afghanistan. It comes via the Afghanistan International Service. Taliban now bans broadcasts of education programs above grade 6 in the Khost region. Sources in Khost province have informed Afghanistan International that the Taliban has now imposed restrictions on educational programs above grade 6, which are broadcast on local radio and television stations. These restrictions have reportedly been implemented on the orders of the Taliban's Ministry of Education. According to information provided by sources in the Khost province, officials from the Taliban's education department in Khost informed media managers that this decision was made based on an official letter from the Ministry of Education. Since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan in August of 2021, education for girls above grade 6 has been suspended. However, local media in various provinces, including Khost, have been broadcasting online education programs that have gained popularity among the public. Local sources report that during a meeting held last Thursday, attended by officials from Taliban's Department of Information and Culture in Khost, media managers were instructed to stop broadcasting educational courses for grades above 6 on the radio. A media representative in Khost told Afghanistan International that this decision likely originated from Kabul, and they are unable to oppose the order. He added that this move not only extinguishes the last hope for girls' education, but also eliminates a significant source of income for media outlets. the head of a local radio station in Khost, explained to Afghanistan International that with these restrictions, local media, which have already lost income from advertising, have turned to offering online courses and selling educational books, which have become an important source of revenue. Previously, the Taliban's police command in Khost had issued an official letter banning women and girls from contacting media outlets by phone. Currently in Khost, there are 15 radio stations and 3 private television stations operating in addition to the national radio and television services. So this is another move by the Taliban government to suppress the abilities of children and women in particular to get education.
Yep, there's been an article that I was reading this week in a newspaper, and they were saying that as the weeks are going by and the months are going by, women is getting tougher and tougher to pretty much have any service of any kind. They're, basically they just want them to stay home, and it's sad to see that, they're blocking education, which is so important, especially, when you're not, there's so many things, a young adult, that you need to know, including a lot of it for your own health. And all of that is being cut. It's really, really sad to see what's happening there.
Yeah, we had the story a few weeks ago about them blocking women from calling into open line shows. And many of those programs they were calling in was to get information, to get advice on certain things, whether it was health matters, whether it was education, whether it was work opportunities. All of that is, being chipped away. And this is just another step. It's really dramatic and really quite sad that this is happening. Hopefully, at some point down the road, some of this will change. But for now, I think we'll continue to run into stories like this.
Yeah, unfortunately. So what's happening with our sun? Well, our sun has been very active, and so active actually that the average sunspot numbers have been giving us the highest solar activity in 23 years, according to the latest reports. Lots of sunspots on the sun once again. There's one that is AR 3806 that could harbor energy for X-class solar flares. And there's a lot of interesting stuff happening on the far side of the sun. So in the coming week and a couple of weeks, I think solar activity might pick up even more. So there's a lot of sunspots. One of them is so huge that it's actually changing the way the sun vibrates. Of course, the week ahead will continue to be a up and down week, depending on the activity of the sun and if there's solar flaring or not. Things can change really quickly, and if you see propagation change, it is interesting because with my amateur radio gear, especially when you're doing FT8, you can notice easily anything that changes, anything that happens. I was doing contacts this week on 15 meters. There were contacts from all over the world, up to Australia. Suddenly, in minutes, all the call letters, all the call signs I would see would only be U.S. and South American stations. Anything out of the Pacific was gone. And at the same time, I could see on my phone I had a solar flare alert. So it's interesting to see that, in minutes, anything changes. It's crazy with high solar activity. Sunspot number 167, the solar flux 241. When conditions are good, they are amazing. Once again this week, do tune around. Lots of signals out there. But you know what? To witness that, you have to do one thing, is to turn on the radio and listen.
This is Peter Laws in Norman, Oklahoma. On the air since 1987, you're tuned to the International Radio Report, 30 minutes of radio about radio, every Sunday morning on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal, and live streaming around the globe at ckut.ca.
Over the years on this radio show, we have talked a lot about pirate radio, illegal broadcasting that goes on out there, some of it shortwave, some of it FM, maybe even a bit of AM at some point in time. But mainly the focus these days, as far as the U.S. government is concerned, is their Pirate Act, as it's called in the United States, where the FCC seemingly has given the FCC more control, more ability to go down and chase down these pirate stations that are operating in some of the major cities throughout the United States. We've talked about many stories of stations being located, served notice, owners of buildings where the stations are broadcasting from also being given warnings, and even a couple of these multi-million-dollar fines being issued. One source that we read from quite often and report on the show is Radio World, and they wrote a really interesting piece back on the 4th of September, Piracy in Flagrant by Paul McLean. It's basically talking about just how effective is this service of the FCC and the ability to go after these stations. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about it. We have some time today to focus on this. So he goes on to say, if Congress is serious about keeping illegal radio stations off the air, perhaps its members can push the Justice Department to follow through on recent FCC forfeiture orders. You recall it in 2020, the Pirate Act, as it's called, Preventing Illegal Radio Abuse Through Enforcement, became law, giving the FCC additional enforcement authority, including higher penalties against pirate broadcasters and any person who permits the operation of pirate radio. It required the FCC to conduct periodic enforcement sweeps and gave it the authority to pursue enforcement actions against landlords and property owners in such cases. The Commission has taken various steps since that time, which you can see listed in a summary form on their Pirate Radio database, which is available online. Notably, in the past 9 months, the FCC has confirmed forfeitures of more than $2.3 million each against 2 separate radio operations in New York City. But will this make any difference? Will those operators ever be obliged to pay, much less turn off their transmitters? In the first case, finalized last fall, and I think we reported on this station actually on the show, the Commission said Cesar Ayora and Luis Angel Ayora are guilty of the long-standing illicit operation of an unauthorized radio station known as Radio Impacto 2 on 105.5 megahertz in Queens, New York. It said enforcement agents found scores of apparent violations between March and September 2022, including multiple weekly on-air radio programs. The Ayoras even advertised their pirate radio station for at least 25 weeks and continue to operate their unauthorized station at last check. There's been no subsequent news from the Commission about the case in almost a year, and the FCC declined comment when I asked. Presumably, the fine has not been collected. In the second, more recent case, the FCC issued a penalty against Johnny Peralta for allegedly operating La Mia Radio, a pirate radio station on 105.7 megahertz in the Bronx, New York. It said the station continually identified itself on the air since at least 2018, and that FCC activity over several years included multiple field strength readings, photos of antenna equipment, and a notice of unauthorized operation left at the site. The antenna appears to have been moved at least twice. The large forfeiture is based only on broadcasts between November 2022 and February 2023, when agents did field strength measurements and La Mia Radio was advertising on-air programs on its website. The FCC said Peralta had been identified in multiple newspaper articles and social media accounts as the owner and director of the station. La Mia Radio appears to remain active, at least based on online activity. The website Al Momento published a story in July reporting that Dominican radio broadcasting entrepreneur Johnny Peralta led the relaunch of his radio station, La Mia Radio 105.7, with a luxurious and modern booth located in the Bedford Park Boulevard sector of the Bronx. A photo of the Natalie outfitted studio appears on Instagram. Neither organization in these cases responded to Radio World requests for comment. In both cases, the FCC gave the operators 30 days to pay. But I'm not holding my breath on that. Historically, collection of pirate radio fines has been problematic to say the least. FCC and Department of Justice officials generally don't talk about that aspect, but they announce constant decrees, so based on the paucity of such news. My uninformed belief is that bureaucracy gets in the way of follow-through, or that justice usually has had bigger things to worry about, given the small financial penalties involved. My hope is that the attention from Congress and the much larger penalties now in play will prompt the Justice Department to come knocking. Meanwhile, there are several more pirate cases that have gone as far as notices of apparent liability, at least 3 of which involve potential 7-figure penalties. But for these bigger fines to have teeth, pirate operators need to believe that the pain, when inflicted, is going to be real. So, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. They've got the power, and they're not really doing much about it.
I mean, we had several stories. We talked about it so many times. But the stories always end at, well, they've got notices, they've got fines. There's nothing else after that. We don't hear about, oh, finally they caught one, or they put one in jail, or he's in trouble because he's got to pay a fine, which he doesn't have the money. I don't know. But plus, at the fact that we were talking about, how landlord of a building, for example, can be liable for a fine if he lets pirates continue their broadcasts. All ideas that you think would really have an impact and change in the fine. I mean, if I get a $2 million fine, I don't know, but I think it's time to shut down. Yet, nope. And we were talking just before, what would happen and how fast would it happen if, say, a big pirate would appear on the FM band in Montreal? How different would it be? How long would it stay on the air before they get shut down? I'd be curious to see. Does the CRTC in Canada, for example, have a bigger bite, bigger possibilities of shutting down an operation than the FCC? I would think the FCC would have means. How hard is it to just say, well, okay, we've got the fine, we've got, everything ready. We just need to have cops come with us and just take everything down.
This is what used to happen years and years ago. There were many well-known cases of the FCC showing up at some of the shortwave broadcasters. And, the knock at the door, they've tracked them down. They get to the location. They know where the signal's coming from. They see an antenna or what have you. They move in, they knock, they go in, they confiscate equipment. The station is off the air. In some cases, they were fined. There were 1 or 2 extreme cases where I think there were jail terms served to some of the operators. But they used to act quickly, and they used to shut them down. Now, these FM stations are causing much more problem on the airwaves to commercial stations than the hobby pirate stations did on shortwave and still do today. Most of these pirate stations operating in these big cities fall into 2 categories. They're either serving a certain element of the ethnic community, or they're religious-based broadcasters. I kind of wonder if they go through the process of getting to the point of issuing a fine or tracking down where they are, but rather than create a scene within the various communities, they decide to back away. But what's the point of going to the edge of the cliff and not pushing the station over the edge? It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They've been given more power, and yet they seem to be actually doing less.
One of the things also that happens a lot and everywhere is when 2 different government departments need to work together for something, it's always very difficult. Here we have the FCC that needs to have the help of the Department of Justice. And they're saying in the article, I bet the Department of Justice has so many cases and so many things to do that, maybe it is saying, look, we're seeing what you have. We totally agree that maybe something should happen, but we don't have the resources to do it also. Maybe that could be one of the problems. They're saying there's so many other things that are more important than a pirate radio station on the air.
You wonder, though, some of these stations have caused problems. People that are operating a transmitter who don't quite exactly know what they're doing. They're not aware that they might be pumping out byproducts, interfering on other frequency ranges. Aeronautical frequencies have had interference at times, emergency services. Commercially licensed radio stations, which pay a lot of money every year to operate their radio stations, are getting interfered with in many cases by these stations. The operators really don't care. They're serving a community. They're bold. They're going out. They're advertising. They have websites. They, collecting advertising revenue, etc. And people are listening to them. Many of them probably don't know that these are illegal radio stations. You tune across the band, you hear these two apparently broadcast in Spanish. Spanish community tunes across. They hear these stations. They see advertising. They probably have no idea that these are illegal operations, and they probably don't care.
And one of the things with that is if nothing changes, well, others will get the same idea and say, hey, we can start our radio station. There's no danger. Nothing's going to happen to us. They're just going to warn us, give us fines and say, hey, you got to, stop. But it stops there and nothing happens. Why not start our own pirate station, Man, it's just funny when you think about it.
It's becoming a bigger and bigger problem, though, particularly in the big cities, New York, Boston, Chicago, Florida, down in Florida, Miami. It's chaos, apparently, on the bands. So I don't know. It looks like they were headed in the right direction, that they had a method, that they were going to do something about it. But as this article says, it looks like they've kind of backed off for some reason. So we'll just have to keep following, see what happens. And it's quite interesting how the whole thing is unfolding, though.
Definitely. So we have upcoming ham radio contests.
It's going to be another busy weekend coming up if you're a ham operator. And if you like to listen to the ham bands, we start with the K1USN Club of Braintree, Massachusetts, that is organizing their K1USN Slow Speed Test Open, 2000 to 2359 Zulu, September 13th. 160 through 10 meter bands are the operating zones, and it is a CW contest.
There's the Worked All Europe DX Contest, SSB, from 0 hours Zulu, September 14th, 2359 Zulu, September 15th, organized by the Deutscher Amateur Radio Club. The bands are 3.5, 7, 14, 21, and 28 megahertz. Mode, SSB.
That's going to be a busy one, all of Europe involved. The First Class CW Operators Club is operating their QSO party, 24-hour event, 0000 to 2359 Zulu on September the 14th. It is all bands, HF bands, except the work bands, and it is CW only.
Organized by the Straight Key Century Club, the SKCC Weekend Sprintathon, 1200 Zulu, September 14th to 2359 Zulu, September 15th. It's 160 through 6 meters, excluding the work bands, and it's CW.
Another popular contest coming up on VHF, organized by the ARRL, American Radio Relay League. It is their September VHF contest, 1800 Zulu, September 14th to 0300 Zulu, September 16th. All amateur bands 6 meters and up. All legal modes are permitted, while CW and SSB phone are the most common. There's also MSK 144, FT8, and FM that only are gaining popularity. And other popular modes such as PSK 31, FSK 441, and JT 65 also included.
Organized by the National Contest Journal, the North American Sprint RTTY, 0 hours Zulu to 0400 hours Zulu, September 15th. Bands 80, 40, and 20 meters only, and the mode CW.
So lots of things for you to participate in, and scattered through the whole radio spectrum next weekend, so lots of stuff for you to check out. That is going to do it for us this week. We do thank you for tuning in. You can reach us by email with any questions or comments. radioreport@yahoo.com is our email address. We are live streaming and archived at ckut.ca here in Montreal. Our Facebook group, International Radio Report, you can join and participate. We have our YouTube channel where you can go and listen to our show at your convenience and go back and listen to previous shows as well. youtube.com/@IRR. And our X account is @IRRCKUT. We invite you to follow us there. Have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you again next Sunday morning with the next edition of the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Bye-bye.